let me say, can I say one thing?
please.
To me, the great Stanley Kubrick
Yeah.
was an actor's enemy.
Well, he did 100 takes.
He was an
personally.
actor's enemy. And I can point to movies that he's done, the worst performances I've ever seen.
Robert Duvall is widely celebrated as one of the most talented and disciplined actors of the 20th century. With unforgettable performances in The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, and Tender Mercies, he built a legacy of excellence based on raw authenticity and unwavering dedication. But while his performances won him praise and admiration, his off-screen relationships weren't always as smooth. Duvall has worked with some of the greatest names in Hollywood, many of them legends in their own right. But behind the scenes, there was one individual who clashed with Duvall in a way that left a permanent scar. The usually private actor once admitted, "I truly hated him more than anyone." Who was this man? And what drove Duvall to such a harsh declaration? This is the untold story of Robert Duvall's most bitter rivalry, the one feud that cut deeper than any role he ever played. From the moment Robert Duvall stepped into the world of acting, it was clear he wasn't there to play games. He was there to work. Born in 1931 to a strict military father, Duvall carried that same discipline into everything he did. Acting, to him, was sacred, not a stepping stone to fame. He trained under the legendary Sanford Meisner and quickly earned a reputation as a performer who valued truth in every line, every movement, every moment. His breakout as Boo Radley in To Kill a Mockingbird wasn't flashy. It was haunting, subtle, unforgettable. He didn't need to raise his voice to be noticed. In a town filled with egos and excess, Duvall stood out for his restraint, professionalism, and unwavering commitment to authenticity. He didn't want to be the most popular guy at the premiere. He wanted to be the best actor on set. That philosophy followed him throughout the 1960s and 70s as he built a filmography rich in complexity and depth. Roles in MASH, True Grit, and The Great Santini showed his range, but it was his portrayal of Tom Hagen in The Godfather that truly cemented his legacy. Yet behind the quiet composure was a man who held deep convictions and fierce expectations, not just of himself, but of those around him. Duvall wasn't just dedicated, he was uncompromising. He believed actors should come prepared, directors should respect the process, and egos should be checked at the door. When people didn't meet those standards, Duvall didn't hold back. He could be blunt, cold, even confrontational if he felt someone wasn't giving the work its due respect. To some, this made him difficult. To others, it made him a purist. But to Duvall, it simply made him honest. As he climbed deeper into Hollywood's inner circle, working alongside legendary names like Al Pacino, Gene Hackman, Dustin Hoffman, and Francis Ford Coppola, the cracks in the industry's golden surface began to show. He saw the vanity, the power plays, the phoniness, and he hated it. Duvall didn't mind disagreements or tough personalities. What he couldn't stand were performers who coasted on their reputations, who disrespected the crew, or who treated the set like their personal playground. And among those he worked with, there was one man whose behavior would become, in Duvall's eyes, the very embodiment of everything wrong with Hollywood. A man whose presence sparked resentment so deep it would linger for decades. Duvall never named him outright in every interview, but in one candid moment he said, "I truly hated him more than anyone." For someone like Robert Duvall, measured, focused, and not known for petty drama, that one line said everything. This wasn't a personality clash or a single bad experience. It was something deeper, something rooted in principle. And as we dig into the story of this long simmering feud, we'll uncover the moment that set it all in motion, and why Duvall, even after decades of greatness, never let it go. When Robert Duvall joined the cast of The Godfather, he was stepping into what would become one of the most iconic productions in cinema history, but he wasn't dazzled by the glamour or the star-studded cast. He was there to work, to bring truth to the role of Tom Hagen, the adopted son and legal advisor to the Corleone family. Duvall's performance was calm, intelligent, and grounded, everything he believed acting should be. But the atmosphere on set wasn't as smooth as it looked on screen. Almost immediately, Duvall grew uneasy with the behavior of Marlon Brando, the larger-than-life star playing Don Vito Corleone. While most of the cast and crew revered Brando, Duvall saw something different, an actor who had stopped caring about craft and started indulging in his own myth. Brando would show up late, struggle with his lines, and demand last-minute changes that derailed scenes and disrupted the focus of others. To Duvall, who showed up early, prepared, and professional every single day, this wasn't just frustrating, it was insulting. What aggravated him even more was the way Brando was idolized for this behavior, as if his sloppiness was some kind of eccentric genius. Duvall didn't buy it. He believed acting required discipline, not distraction. He once said, "I don't confuse talent with tantrums." And on the set of The Godfather, he saw Brando's antics as exactly that, self-indulgent distractions from the real work. The tension didn't explode into outright conflict, but it simmered, quiet and bitter. Duvall felt the imbalance everywhere, in how Brando was paid more, given more control, treated like royalty, while others, like himself, were expected to simply fall in line. Years later, when asked about working with Brando, Duvall didn't hold back. He referred to him as the most overrated actor of our time, and dismissed the romanticized view of Brando as a tortured genius. Duvall saw him as unreliable, difficult, and undeserving of the reverence he received. Their working relationship remained civil, but it was cold, distant, and deeply strained. While the rest of the world praised The Godfather as a masterpiece, and rightfully so, Duvall's memory of it was forever colored by what he saw as a betrayal of professional respect. And that bitterness only deepened with time. Unlike others who softened their views in later years, Duvall stuck to his principles. He didn't revise history to flatter Brando's legacy. He refused to pretend the experience was something it wasn't. For him, the greatest crime on that set wasn't ego or tension. It was the disrespect shown toward the craft of acting by someone who should have known better. And in Duvall's eyes, there was no excuse for it.
He didn't care how famous you were, how many Oscars you had, or how much the public loved you. If you disrespected the work, you lost his respect forever.
Brando, in Duvall's world, wasn't a hero. He was a disappointment. And that disappointment, buried beneath decades of success and silence, eventually turned into something more powerful. Not just resentment, not just frustration, but pure, lasting hatred, the kind that doesn't come from a single bad day on set, but from years of watching someone undermine everything you believe in. For Duvall, the set of The Godfather wasn't just a workplace, it was a battleground of values. And Brando, whether he knew it or not, was the enemy. Years after The Godfather and Apocalypse Now had sealed Robert Duvall's place among the greats, a familiar opportunity came knocking, the chance to reprise his role as Tom Hagen in The Godfather, Part 3. But this wasn't just another sequel for Duvall, it was a test of principles. When negotiations began, Duvall discovered that Al Pacino, his longtime co-star, was being offered nearly 3 times his salary. The studio saw Pacino as the face of the franchise now, and Duvall, despite being a core part of the Corleone family's legacy, was treated as a supporting act, easily replaceable. For Duvall, it wasn't about the paycheck, it was about respect, about being recognized for the weight he carried across 2 of the most important films of the 20th century. He made his stance clear. If they'd paid me the same as Al, I would have done it. But they didn't. He walked away. And just like that, Tom Hagen vanished from the final chapter of the Corleone saga. The studio tried to spin it. Coppola rewrote the script, and a new character filled the void. But the absence was glaring. Fans noticed. Critics noticed. The soul of the family, the quiet conscience behind the power, was gone. And in that silence, something louder emerged. Duvall's refusal to bow to the same broken system that had always placed ego over effort, stardom over substance. To Duvall, this moment wasn't just about Part 3. It was the final nail in a long-standing coffin of grievances he'd carried since his earliest days working with Brando. Duvall saw a straight line from Brando's behavior in The Godfather, the special treatment, the inflated pay, the pedestal, to the way the industry continued to operate decades later. The Brando effect, as he saw it, was still alive. Talent didn't matter as much as the myth. You could be disruptive, disrespectful, or even disinterested, but if you were a name, Hollywood would bend. For Duvall, who had spent his life showing up, preparing, and putting in the work, this was the ultimate insult. And it proved to him that the thing he'd hated most, everything Brando represented, was not just a personality flaw, but a systemic rot. Even though he'd long since finished working with Brando and the man himself had passed away in 2004, Duvall's words remained sharp. "Some people think acting is about being a personality," he once said. "But it's not. It's about the truth. And if you're not chasing the truth, you're just pretending." That one line could have been carved in stone as Duvall's creed, and Brando, in his mind, was the ultimate pretender. So when Duvall declined The Godfather Part 3, it wasn't just a business decision, it was a declaration. A refusal to play the same game that had rewarded the man he resented more than any other. And while the public may never have seen a blow-up between them, the truth was buried in every interview, every quote, every pause Duvall made when Brando's name was mentioned. It wasn't just dislike, it was philosophical warfare, a rejection of everything Brando stood for. And as time went on, Duvall didn't soften. He didn't forgive. He held the line. Because in his world, respect wasn't given, it was earned. And when it wasn't, there was no going back. As the years passed and the industry around him changed, Robert Duvall remained unmoved, unapologetic in his beliefs, unbending in his standards and unforgiving toward those who had, in his eyes, tarnished the integrity of acting. While many actors mellowed with age or rewrote their own legacies through polished memoirs and carefully worded interviews, Duvall never played that game. He didn't care about smoothing over old grudges for the sake of diplomacy or legacy. If anything, he became more candid in his later years. When asked in one interview whether there was anyone in Hollywood he genuinely despised, Duvall didn't hesitate. "Yeah," he said with a hard, matter-of-fact stare. "I truly hated him more than anyone." The room fell silent. He didn't need to say the name. The history spoke for itself. The bitterness wasn't born out of envy or ego. It came from something far deeper. Betrayal. Not personal betrayal, but a betrayal of the craft Duvall had spent his entire life defending. For Duvall, acting was more than a job, or even an art form. It was a sacred responsibility. And those who treated it like a playground, those who relied on chaos and charisma to coast, were not just misguided. They were offensive. Marlon Brando had long since become a Hollywood myth, a figure immortalized in film history, but to Duvall, that myth was hollow. Even after Brando's death, Duvall's stance didn't waver. He called him out publicly, calling the worship of Brando a joke and accusing Hollywood of celebrating someone who, in his view, abandoned discipline for theatrics. There were no fond memories, no stories of reconciliation, no warm reflections. Just the same piercing disappointment that had lingered since The Godfather set. Duvall's own legacy, in contrast, became one of quiet strength and relentless honesty. He never sought stardom, he earned respect. And while the headlines never revolved around scandals or feuds, that one admission, of hating a man more than anyone, cut through the silence like a scalpel. It revealed the weight he carried, the grudge that never lifted, and the principles that refused to bend, even with time. Unlike so many of his peers, Duvall didn't rewrite history to sound better in retrospect. He let the truth stand, unfiltered, even if it was uncomfortable. And maybe that's why, decades later, fans and filmmakers alike still look to him not just as a great actor, but as a symbol of something increasingly rare: integrity. He didn't fake humility for cameras. He didn't smile through resentment. He said what he meant and meant what he said. And when he said he hated someone, he meant it. Not out of bitterness, but out of belief. Because in Robert Duvall's world, respect wasn't a default. It was earned through commitment, consistency, and humility. And once it was lost, it was never coming back. In an industry built on illusions, Duvall remained a man of substance. And while the world may remember Brando as a legend, Duvall's quiet, unshakable judgment reminds us that even legends can fall short, and that the real heroes of Hollywood might not be the loudest voices in the room, but the ones who never sold out their soul for the spotlight.